Many of Syria's minorities are waiting to see if the country's new rulers will come good on the promise to protect their rights and freedoms. The Islamist group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, has sought to reassure them after ending decades of brutal repression under the Assad regime. But for some, there's a sense of ambivalence towards the new Syria.
Salim comes here for comfort. His local church near his home in central Damascus. He wants it to continue being a safe space in the new Syria.
The new group that will rule the country in the next phase. I'm not sure how it will be. It's still unclear, honestly, and I can't predict it. I can't say it will be negative, but also I can't be reassured.
Like many of Syria's minority groups, Christians are eager to find their place under Syria's new government. Right on their doorstep, they see signs of the change already underway. The flag of Syria under Assad's rule is being erased.
We're painting it white. May it bring us white and prosperous days. That's it. We were forced to paint the flag on our doors, all of us, but now we're free to paint it in white.
Many of Salim's friends have long since left the country to escape the turbulent political situation over the past decades, and he worries that now things might get worse.
Do you see how people are queuing for bread? That's a bakery in there.
But despite the fall of the Assad regime, he says very little has changed so far.
The only thing that has changed here is that this building of the Air Force intelligence is empty. It was always surrounded by armed soldiers. Now I don't see them. Otherwise, it's all the same.
The Air Force Intelligence Building is a prominent feature of central Damascus, known for its brutal detention center. The base is now occupied by Syrian opposition fighters. They show us what the regime agents left behind.
This is the interrogation room. These are the prison cells. And these were the clothes of the detainees. These chairs were used for torture.
After seeing the prison, Salim starts believing that a new future might be possible in Syria.
I'm optimistic that there will be change indeed. Things will be more relaxed. It will no longer be complicated and oppressive. But what worries me the most is the chaos in this transitional period. Maybe this is what I'm scared of.
It's time for Salim to leave, but I have a last question about his relationship with Damascus.
My relationship with Damascus? Just like when you fight with your lover, you know. Love is equally sweet and bitter. And that's how my relationship with Damascus is.
A complex relationship in a complex city, where he hopes to find a reassuring future.
OK, let's talk to Aaron Zelin now, a fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Welcome to the show. Where do you see Syria's future under the new leadership heading?
I think in relation to minority communities, there's a lot of questions. The way that they ruled previously, especially in the last few years, minorities were allowed to be left alone and they weren't really harassed. At the same time, they didn't have political representation within their civilian-led government. And yet we've seen a lot of messaging that there would be potentially more openness to greater involvement of minorities in it. At the same time, the transitional government so far has just been a carbon copy of what they had running in Idlib previously. So, there remains to be a lot to be seen.
How much should the minorities, like the Christians we saw in the report, trust what they're being told, trust what they're hearing?
I think that they should compare and contrast what's being said and how things are playing out on the ground in reality. Thus far, like in the report, things have been relatively the same and similar. But the question is, what will it look like by the end of the transition on March 1st, or what will it look like in a year from now? Obviously, everybody in the world is watching the moves of HTS. What happens when people move on to other news stories that seem more pertinent? So I think you've got to continue to compare and contrast what's being said to the realities.
Yeah, it's a fresh situation and moving all the time. So US President-elect Donald Trump says Turkey holds the key to Syria's future. How do you see a continuing Turkish involvement in the country?
I think it all depends on how things in the eastern part of the country play out. Turkey backs the Syrian National Army, which has continued to fight against the US-backed Syrian Democratic Forces. We should recall that the Syrian Democratic Forces are the ones who have been fighting on the ground against the Islamic State over the last 10 years. And so there are a lot of potential bad scenarios if the Turkish-backed forces overtake the US-backed forces, because there are 10,000 male ISIS members that are imprisoned in northeast Syria. And I don't think anybody wants to see that, let alone Turkey, considering the fact that it's right across its border.
Yeah, the HTS leadership in Syria says it doesn't want any further wars, but Israel has continued its airstrikes. How's that going to play out?
I think that at this point, Israel's shown its cards, but at a certain point, there's not any redeeming value behind it, especially if it leads to more individuals in the population seeking an actual fight with Israel, because it could just radicalize a movement that has actually, transformed over the last 8.5 years to become less radical. So one would think from a strategic perspective that it wouldn't make sense to continue doing these types of airstrikes.
Aaron Zelin, thank you so much for joining us on DW.